Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab show. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm an NLP Master Life Coach, meditation instructor, and a seeker of happiness. And each week, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover additional ways of self-care, self-love, and becoming a healthier, happier you. So thanks for spending time with us today, and let's let the show begin. Hey there and welcome. Today we're going to talk about resilience. So the market is changing rapidly right now. We are, are we in a recession? I don't know. Inflation is pretty high. The gas prices are coming down, so that's a good thing. I am also in real estate with a growing real estate practice, and there's been a lot of shifts. If you're in a market that either you're in a market that's shifting or it's already shifted, and if it hasn't, it's going to shift. Everything is changing, right? It's no longer this fast oversell. Everything's kind of settling down. So if you came into the market in the last 3 or 4 years, or maybe 5 years. It's been challenging in that there's so much movement. It's about getting your offer in and, placing it correctly, but the marketing is substantially different, right? So right now, if you have been in the market, if you have been in the real estate market for a long time, in other industries as well, I'm just speaking to what I know. You know how to get back to basics and change. So basically, it's about having resilience. This market is probably going to see the exodus of a number of real estate professionals because it's such a shift in a market and they're not quite sure how to manage this new market. But if you are resilient and you take the things that you've learned, you can come out even better and stronger as the market shifts. You shift with the market and you come out even stronger at the other side. And I use real estate as an example, but it's the same thing in all kinds of problems and challenges that we might have in our life. And that's what life is about, right? These different things come up all the time. So Winston Churchill has a quote that I like. It says, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's a courage to continue that counts." So whatever your problem, challenge, setback you may be having now, or may have in the future, it's really just about the recovery, having the resilience, having the ability to bounce back. The dictionary defines resilience as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And psychology today describes it this way. It says, resilience is that infallible quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back even stronger than ever, rather than letting failure overcome them and drain the resolve. They find a way to rise from the ashes. That kind of reminds me, I'm really dating myself, I know, but those Weeble Wobble dolls, how many of you remember those Weeble Wobble dolls? And basically they had all this sand in the bottom. And so if you punch them or push them or whatever, they bend down and they bounce right back up. And, like many of you, I've had times in my life where you just get punched and you jump back up, and you get punched and you jump back up. And then sometimes it's like somebody drained that sand out of the bottom of that punching bag and it just stays down, right? And then it's a question. It just takes a little bit longer to get up. Resilience is important. And so my intention with the podcast today is to maybe give you an exercise that I learned recently from positivepsychology.com. I encourage you to visit that website. That's where I'm taking that information from, which we'll get to in a minute. And an exercise, they have a number of exercises in building resiliency, and one that I'm going to share with you. But basically, it's really not seeing yourself as a victim, and it's learning to manage your strong emotions and your reactions. Not recognizing false beliefs and focusing on the solutions rather than the problems. I was recently, this past week, I was at a Tony Robbins event. No, it wasn't a Tony Robbins event. It was a real estate event, actually. And Tony Robbins was a keynote speaker. And he talks about changing your state, right? And how you can change your state in an instant. And basically, it boils down to one of the quickest ways to change your state if you're feeling in a non-positive state or a non-energetic place. One of the quickest ways to change your state is your physiology, is your body, right? How are you holding your back? Are you slouched down? Is your head down? How is your voice? How are you speaking? you'll find that if you sit up straight, you hold your head up high, and you're speaking in a stronger and standing in a stronger way, it's immediately going to switch the way, change your state. It's going to change the way that you feel. And another thing that he talks about is, what are you focusing on? So when we have a setback, a challenge, or a problem, really noticing what you're focusing on, and are you focusing on the things that are going to move you along and move you out of that place, or are you focusing on the actual problem that might keep you actually anchored in that place, and sometimes make that period of indecision, that period of being in the challenge, longer, when that's where you're focusing, instead of focusing what's on the other side, instead of future pacing yourself so that you're seeing, where am I on the other side, not only on the other side of this, but on the way down the line, where is it that I want to be? So that when I look back to now, I can recognize, what are the steps that I need to take to get to where I want to be. Does that make sense? So if you have something that's a setback right now that's in your life, and if you were to imagine, where do you want to be 6 months from now, or where do you want to be a year from now, and imagine yourself in that place, and imagine yourself, but actually like feeling it in your body. Like, what are you going to see? What are you going to smell? How is it going to feel? And so you really feel like you're there already. And then turn around and look back to now. What did you need to do to get from where you are to where you want to be? Where are those steps? And one of the ways that you can understand the concept a little bit better is to think back to a challenge that you had in the past, maybe something you had, a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever the case might be, some setback, problem, challenge that you had that you've gone away from. And you're right now, and look back to that time. And if you can, in your mind, as you're looking back, then also kind of time travel to, what were the steps? What took you away from where you were and got you to where you are now? And maybe where you are now is not a better place. So, even more importantly, what were the steps that took you from where you were to where you are now, so that you can recognize, where is the wisdom? What did you learn? What could you have done better? What maybe was not the best thing that you chose to do, that you could have chosen another action, and what would have been the results? And what were the results of what you did choose? So being resilient gives you the strength to be able to cope with stress and hardships, because you'll work that resilient muscle and reach the understanding that everything is passing, right? If you're an extreme high right now, well, that's probably going to pass too. And you could have a little dip, but you're going to get back to your extreme high again. And if you're going through a real tough time right now, if you focus on a different outcome, paying attention to what you're focusing on, or is your focus keeping you there, or is your focus taking you away from there to where you want to go? Paying attention to that. So we're going to go through an exercise that I was speaking about earlier when we started the podcast. And this is from positivepsychology.com. And they have a whole section there on resiliency and different beautiful exercises that you can do to build that resiliency muscle. And that's what I want to share with you today. So in building that muscle, they actually have you do an exercise. And so you would take a piece of paper and make an X across the paper, kind of like a SWOT analysis, but they call this the 4 S's. So as you make a cross in the paper, so you have 4 blocks. And in the 4 blocks, you're going to label them. One is going to be supports. The other is strategies. The other is a word they call sagacity. That's SAGACITY. And then the last one is solution seeking. Okay, you guys ready? You're ready to play this game. You're ready to learn a skill set to help you become more resilient. So in learning to cope with whatever life throws at you, not only cope with it, but come out even stronger on the other side, there are things that you can draw upon in your own personal resources as you're moving forward. So one of the first things that we're going to do in this exercise is we're going to identify who so first of all, let's think of some recent event, some past event where you had not something that's going on right now, but in the past, where you had a challenge, a problem, or a setback, and that you were able to, and just kind of, if you have a pen and paper in front of you, take a minute and write down what was that situation. And if you're driving and you can't do that right now, so go ahead and stop the podcast and take a minute and write it down. And if you're driving, you can always come back to this if it interests you. I hope it does. But take a minute, go ahead and stop the podcast and take a minute to write down what it was that was your challenge. Now, in step number 2, we're going to identify your supportive people. So we all have people, well, hopefully we all have people in our lives, and you have people that you love and that you talk to, and let's just face it, they're not really the most supportive people. Doesn't mean you can't love them and you want them in their life, but they're not the most supportive people. And then they could be family, could be friends, but you also do have people in your life, probably, hopefully, and it can be family, it can be friends, it can be a therapist, it can be your banker, it can be a coach, whoever that person may be. That is a great support. You're able to talk to them. They're good listeners. Sometimes they give you nuggets of wisdom. Most of the time, they're really good listeners, and they ask the right questions, meaning they're asking you questions to help you think. And hopefully you're that kind of friend for your friends, right? Instead of giving them all the advice, which might be wrong because you're not living in their shoes, even though you think you can relate, but rather asking them the right questions so that they're able to come to the answers themselves. So as you think about who are those people in your life, take a minute and write them down. And write them down with their phone numbers. So you can write it on a list, or when we drew that box, right, the cross and the one that is labeled supportive people, go ahead and write those people down in that box so you know who your resource peeps are. Okay? Again, if you are able to, go ahead and stop this and do this at that time. And the third step is identifying your strategies. So when you reflect on that setback or challenge that you had in the past, really dig in deeper. And what were the strategies that you used to be able to get to the other side of that? So for me, I can say that meditation is hugely important. That helps me get through a lot. There are lots of different ways to meditate. Sometimes it's just breathing exercises. Sometimes it's being still. Sometimes it's mindful meditation where you're just paying attention to really what's in front of you. Maybe getting in nature, journaling, talking a lot about it, writing down the problem, or doing a gratitude journal. Whatever it might be for you, whatever the strategy is for you to help you cope with any negative thoughts and feelings that show up in response to whatever this setback might be. Anything that helps you release tension. So, for example, it could be listening to music that you enjoy. It might be dancing, right? And what is it that you do to help yourself cope with negative thoughts so that you can replace them with not only positive thoughts, but actionable thoughts that are going to put you in the right direction? And write those down. Now, the fourth step is to identify sagacity. And sagacity is when you bounce back, there are always these wisdom and insight. So sagacity would be defined as the wisdom and the insight that you obtain from going through different challenges and setbacks in your life. And if you can think of a challenging time and you say, well, there wasn't any wisdom, then I'm going to challenge you to think even deeper, because there always is, always, like 100% of the time. There's learning that comes out of every single event. So, what is a learning or learnings that you can extract from that event? And it can come from, you know, lyrics, it can come from poetry, um, quotes that you might read. You know, that helps me a lot. Some of the wisdom, like when I'm going through a challenging time, and I love to read different quotes. And I have a book where I keep track of quotes that have influenced me and that make me feel empowered or make me even just think even deeper. Um, so even sayings, maybe something that your parents said or your grandparents said that help you learn and grow from that experience, or even just things that you came up with yourself. So write down, what are your wisdom nuggets? You know, is it a quote? Is it a lyric? Is it just a learning or knowing that you obtained yourself? Is it somebody in your family line that is passed down to you? For me, you know, my both my parents are hard workers, but my father, who passed away 4 years ago, gosh, I don't know that I've ever met a more honest person than my father, and hard worker than my father. And those are always, I don't know if you'd call them, yeah, I would classify them as wisdom, because they're sound foundational blocks that allow me to understand that when I draw upon that, it can get me through anything as well. So leaning into those and writing those down so that they click and you remember them, right? And then finally, the last one and the fourth nugget is, what solution seeking behaviors did you display to help you actively deal with this challenge, problem, setback? For example, did you research and seek out new information? Or did you speak up and voice your opinion? Or did you decide to just shift your focus somewhere else? Or did you ask help from others? Or did you reach out and decide to help others? So, what was your behavior that you displayed to help you navigate this space? Again, I'm going to speak from my own personal experiences. A big challenge of mine has been, I have a son with a SUD, substance use disorder. So, if you don't know what that is, he's addicted to drugs, and with that comes mental health issues, and so on and so on. And while I spent a good deal of my time before that, I was extremely resilient. And early in the process of that, I was very resilient. And then it was kind of what I was talking about, the weeble wobble. That sand got drained and I was like down. And I had to use all these skills to be able to, I don't know that you'd say overcome this challenge, because the challenge is his challenge, not my challenge. My challenge was, how do I manage this so that it doesn't keep me down? Because my management of the process, my lack of resiliency in this space kept me down for a very long time. And so really relying on, this is a perfect example for me, on the quotes that I picked up, the behaviors that I adapted to be able to navigate through the process. For me, it was learning everything I could about addiction. It was learning everything I could about self-care. It was why I created this podcast, because I think self-care and self-love is so important, because when you stop having it, everything else falls apart. So those wisdom nuggets, and to keep moving forward, just keep moving forward, right? To help me with, and I draw upon that with anything else that comes up now, and I will draw upon that as anything that comes up in the future. So in that square, as far as solution seeking behaviors, write down, what were your solution seeking behaviors? What did you do? You know, speak up, don't research. Um, what did you do? What were your behaviors that helped you move on from that situation? So now, if you can think of, or if you happen to have a particular problem or challenge that you're working through at the moment, can you apply the four S's to this problem and see if you can maybe bounce back? If your resilient muscle got a little bit stronger doing this exercise, and bounce back a little bit quicker. And I hope the answer is yes. And I'd like to ask you if you would do me a favor and you would write in the comment box below if that was able to help you, and what piece of that was most helpful to you, if you're able to use that exercise yet. Because If everything is going perfect for you right now, and I hope that it is, that's great. But it's very probable that in the future, you're going to have challenges. You're going to have problems. That is one of the beauties of life, especially when you start seeing and believing and reframing that these challenges, and yes, even the most difficult ones, if actually, especially the most difficult ones, are this tremendous opportunity for growth and expansion for you personally and for those that you care about or those that you reach out to. Because when you can acquire the wisdom and then you lovingly share the wisdom, hopefully you're able to help others reach a stronger level of resiliency within themselves. So I'll leave you that. Please leave your comments below and let me know if you tried the exercise and if the exercise was useful for you. Again, I want to give credit to positivepsychology.com. They've got a lot of really good stuff in there. I'm going to get my hands in as soon as I'm done with this podcast because there was a lot of cool stuff in there that I want to explore even more. And I wish you guys a really fantastic week, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and want more information on our guests and resources, please visit ilovemelab.com. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share with a friend. Hey, there's more great episodes to come. So until next time.